Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here is our homework. So we are talking about opposites first. And remember, opposites are just they have the same distance from zero, right? So if I was on a number line and this was 0, and say this was -2 and this was +2, right? They have the same distance from 0, okay? So they would be opposites. -2 is the opposite of 2. If I was looking at 6, what's the opposite of 6? That would be -6. If I was looking at the opposite of -3, which would be like here on the number line, well, you'd go to the one over here that had the same distance, 1, 2, 3, and that's going to be +3. Remember, 0 is special. 0 is neither positive nor negative, and it is considered its own opposite. So the opposite of 0 is 0. Now this part, talking about opposite of the opposite, is going to get a little tricky, okay? So here's how I went about doing this. The opposite of the opposite. I started with what I had, which was 12. And I know that the opposite of 12 is -12. Well, so then what's the opposite of -12? Well, that would be +12. So really, it's just going to stay what it is. Okay, so if that's the case, then -9, the opposite of -9 is 9, and the opposite of +9 is -9. So it would be -9. If I start with -17, the opposite of -17 is +17, and the opposite of that opposite is -17. Okay? Now, this is fancy. We haven't heard these terms before. This is evaluate, just means solve, right? Expression is just anything that doesn't have an equal sign, okay? So when I look at this, I say this as the absolute value of -14, right? Well, we know that absolute value what absolute value is the distance from 0, right? So if I'm on a number line and this is 0, -14 is going to be way over here. And I know that how many spaces is it from 0? 14. So the answer to the absolute value of -14 would be +14. Because it is the distance from 0, remember, distance can't be negative. I can't go -4 feet, right? Distance can't be negative. Oh, I didn't spell that right. Negative. Okay, so then if I'm looking here, this is just a math problem, so you got to think, okay? What does this say? Well, these lines are asking for the absolute value of 31. Well, we know that's going to be 31. Minus, we're just going to carry that down. This is the absolute value of -1. Well, what's the absolute value of -1 is going to be 1. So 31 now minus 1 is 30. Okay? So now let's look at this one. This says the absolute value of -15. Well, we know that that's the distance from 0, and since it can't be negative, we know that's going to be 15. And 15 plus, because that's just going to drop right down, okay? This one now is the absolute value of -6. Well, we know it can't be negative for absolute value, so we have 15 plus 6, which is going to be 21, okay? Number 10, right? It's just telling you that he spent $18 on a shirt and he spent $24 on a pair of pants. It just wants to know what's the total amount. So guys, this is just a simple addition problem. 18 plus 24, he spent $42, okay? Here, number 11, this one's a little bit tricky, so let's look at what it says. We have to remember this vocabulary. So Lily saw a jellyfish that was 6 feet below sea level. And since this is below, we know that means negative. So that fish was -6 feet below sea level. Then she saw a bright blue fish, a fish at 10 feet below sea level. Well, again, below sea level is negative, so we know -10, okay? So the way I thought about this problem was I thought about an ocean, right? So I'm gonna come over here and draw a little number line. Guys, remember I told you we're gonna be doing a lot with number lines. If this is 0, right? 0 is sea level. Okay, below sea level is going to be all these feet, right? Oh, I'm going to run out of room. Oh, drats. Okay, just disregard my ugliness here. That's -7, -8, -9, -10. Oh my gosh, that's the ugliest number line ever. But that's okay, because we learned from our mistakes. I should have given myself more space. But if you think about it, anything below sea level is going to be negative. This question just says she saw 2 fish. She saw a fish here at 6 feet below sea level, and she saw a fish at 10 feet below sea level. Okay, the question just says, what's the distance between the bluefish and the jellyfish? So again, remember, what can't be negative? Up here, what did we say? We said distance can't be negative. So all I'm going to do is just say how many spots are between here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the distance is 4 feet for the fish. Okay? All right, number 12. The table shows the melting points of various elements, right? So we're looking at neon and hydrogen. But notice what it says. It talks about the absolute value. So we're going to practice writing that. Well, the absolute value of -248 equals what? So it asks for the absolute value. Well, the absolute value of -248 is going to be 248. And then it wants, that's neon, and then it wants the absolute value of hydrogen, which is -259, the absolute value, which is actually going to be 259. Well, which number? It just wants to know, is the neon greater than or less than hydrogen? Well, if this is neon and this is hydrogen, 259 is greater. So I could write that like this. 259 is greater than 248. Or if you wanted to do it like mathematically, you would say the absolute value of -259 is greater than the absolute value of -248. Okay? Number 13. The surface of Jupiter is made of colorful clouds created by various chemicals in the atmosphere. The temperature at the top of the clouds, woo, that's really cold, -230 degrees Fahrenheit. That's on top, right? The temperature below the clouds is 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where we live. We live below the clouds, right? Which temperature has a lower absolute value? So here we go. -230 compared to the absolute value of, oops, that was a mess up. Don't look at that. The absolute value of 70. Well, I know that this, the absolute value of -230 is going to be 230. I know the absolute value of 70 is going to be 70. So which temperature has a lower, so that means smaller, actually, that would be this one. So the temperature below the clouds is, gosh darn it, I made a mistake again. That's going to be like this. 230 is greater. Okay? Whoopsies. Okay, last 3 questions. Here we go. Now these are bonus. They're kind of like challenge your brain. Okay? We did not do this in class, but I just want to see if you can apply what we know. So I know that the absolute value of 3 right here is 3, but then the negative sign is on the outside. So I'm going to do the bracket. You're off. Okay, sorry, my videographer is slacking here.
I'm a great videographer.
So if I'm looking at this, remember we've been talking about GEMDAS, remember? Okay, and we talked about this groupings, okay? This absolute value sign right here, that's a type of grouping. So that's gonna come first, okay? So I see the absolute value, I'm gonna do that first. This negative sign is on the outside of my absolute value, so it's gonna stick. So this is actually going to be -3. Oh look, there's that word evaluate again. What does that mean? It just means solve. Okay, so now, okay, look, here's these absolute value signs. These are gonna go right here with GEMDAS, right, with the G. These are a type of grouping, so I do those first. So I'm just gonna do, what's 5 plus 9? Well, what is 5 plus 9?
That would be 14.
Okay, so 14. So then the absolute value of 14 would be what? 14. So that's how we solve that question. Then we're gonna come over here and do this one. Well, notice I have groupings. So I do what's inside the groupings first. So what's 17 minus 8?
17
Videographer.
minus 8 is 9.
Okay, so that would be the absolute value of 9. And then once I have that all solved, then I can say, well, the absolute value of 9 is 9. Voila! Your homework.
Amazing.